The key unanswerable question on environment, and gets to the heart of the matter, is if every Chinese and Indian had the same living standards as someone in Sweden, what would happen to the world's resources? The counter-argument is, okay, let's keep them poor. Would that be better? Well, I think it's immoral and wrong, in fact, because the worst pollution, and some people want to do that by having the state decide things, government will decide and set up some rules. Well, the worst, and they talk of capitalist greed, don't they? Well, they never talk of communist greed, because the worst pollution and the worst places on earth were the communist countries because of their greed to build more steel, because the communists agreed to produce more electricity, produce more cotton, produce more rice, dam rivers, and no civil society, no debate.
They didn't even have a democratic
planning process. Of course, because
that's and so if we promote democracy in these places that are getting polluted, then the people can push back.
That's right. The evidence is that democracy is actually an economic good, not just not a moral good. That tolerant societies that accept you because of your gender or anything else and don't care about your race, they tend to do better, and they're more attractive places to live. That's why Toronto, New York, Sydney, Auckland, Hong Kong are interesting places. Cape Town. But you're not going to live in Zimbabwe, you're not going to live in North Korea, are you? And they're the least globalised places.
I think the final question on the environment, it's slightly different from pollution, that sort of thing. It's not just this particular question I've chosen, but it's many people have mentioned it. It's to do with, I think it's more to do with the idea of the fact that we don't specify a value or a cost to environmental damage through mining and that sort of thing, and development. So this person, Space Monkey 9001, says, "Sir, you..."
The same guy as the Space Monkey.
No, that's Monkeys Ate My Ego. So this is Space Monkey.
It's a team,
All right. Sir, you've said that we've created more wealth in the last 60 years than all of history put together. That is great, but we've also decimated our planet in the same time frame. Now, not believing in coincidences, those two have to be connected, he says. So what would you think about the immense environmental damage that globalisation would seem to have caused?
Well, I made the point earlier, the greatest attack on the environment produced the worst outcomes, and the filthiest, cruelest places and the dirtiest places were in fact not globalised places, but in Marxist Russia, the Aral Lake, and in parts of China, where they were closed societies. So I wouldn't say globalisation has done that. And the most rip-offs in forestry and mining have been in closed economies where their governments haven't scrutinised but just taken the money, banked it, and allowed these terrible people just to do what they like. So, of course, any human activity has an environmental cost. Any kind of activity has an environmental cost. Poverty has a huge environmental cost. You go to Ethiopia or countries where poor people are stripping the wood from the forest, carrying them down, bundles and bundles. Of course, poverty has a huge cost. That's just not trade, please. There's other issues too, of central banking, of property rights, of education, training. The big question is, will you run out of resources? You can't keep pulling this gas out of the ground forever, can you? Well, you probably can't. Although the Club of Rome, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, was saying we're going to run out of oil, tin, gold in the 1980s. We didn't. This is not an argument to not think about these issues. But here's what, and what I'm saying that I can't prove, and I may be wrong, but I hope I'm not. But the ingenuity of our species, if you put proper costings into energy uses, that will drive up alternatives. And the worst thing that can happen to the environment, if you really want to do something on energy, keep oil prices above $150 a barrel. Then the investment will pour into alternate areas, hydrogen, people will work things out. We hope. But that has been the story of our species. There were reports that unless we did something in London, the number of horses coming into the city would be under 3 feet of horse shit unless something happened. The canal proprietors bought off the politicians to stop the railways. It was going to be a terrible thing. Then the railways guys got worried about the motorways. The motorway guys are getting worried about we might be going back canal and rail. This is a natural evolutionary thing in our species. And maybe those thousands of graduates are coming out in India and China will be thinking. But investment will travel where it feels safe. And therefore firm rules, predictable rules, and governments that can be trusted, and courts that if I have a problem with you I can go to court and solve it. These are not small things. There's essentially moral attitude by some environmentalists of keeping poor people poor. That if, it's all very well for them to say, I'm on my bike and I'm prepared to drop my living standard and never go on an aeroplane again. Why should we say that to the poorest people on the planet? Shouldn't they have the same lifestyle as we? Sure, we're going to have to change our behaviour, and we are. Look at the global crisis. As men, for the first time in a generation, Americans are beginning to save. That's a big thing. Some of those big companies, car companies in America, are going broke. Why? They're producing the wrong kind of cars. The smaller companies from Japan and Korea are taking their, and building them in the States, are taking their market. That's things working. But we get down to false prices on energy. This will retard progress, retard investment, and in the end, I don't think you really care with medicine, who's invented the medicine, where it's come from, whether it's a scientist in Bangalore or Boston. You just want access for your children to it. If you do have proper patent rights, someone who gets the hydrogen car, gets the process going. I think a lot of this is based on costs.
Can I just go back to
the truth is, for all the propaganda in the world and all the hysteria, the only time real change was made in energy costings was in the 70s with the first oil crisis. The whirlwind fell apart. Everyone was going to smaller cars, the mini miner was developed, blah, blah. Well, that was partly because of the Suez crisis, but they'll respond. And the world started to move, and suddenly the oil price collapsed. All those guys went out of business, and we went back to the old ways.
So put humans under pressure, and they'll...
I think people are smart. They'll work their way through in the main. It would be lovely to think we had a World Energy Organisation that put up $100 million that whoever gets full injection pump right, that's your prize, or $50 million, whoever can solve this disease, and then becomes a global patent. But we don't have that. We have to live in the world that we have and try to improve it. And in the main, we have improved it. I mean, just the attitude of kids these days to the environment is so different than in my day. These little kids keep telling you to not to eat meat, and they go on and on, bossy little guys. But they're thinking about it all the time because they see. In my generation, it was Cold War. The environment is the defining issue for young people, and so they're going to look at it, and new things will come up.